Hi Internet, welcome to the Greg Troyan YouTube channel, and welcome to Greg's 14 Adventures, a weekly vlog where I discuss my journey through Final Fantasy XIV as a first-time player. I beat A Realm Reborn back in 2022, and I'm finally finishing up the rest of the game. These vlogs are documenting my journey. If you like these videos and want to support their continued production, the best way to do that is to like the video, share it on a relevant social media site like Reddit, and leave a comment. And don't forget to check out the playlist of previous episodes, linked in the description and pinned comment. Thanks, pal. Hey friends, it's your buddy Greg, here with another Final Fantasy XIV vlog, continuing our journey through the great Final Fantasy XIV filler arc. I'm continuing my journey of watching all of the job quests on YouTube, or rather, all of the job quests for pre-Shadowbringers jobs that I haven't done on YouTube. So continuing our journey through that, and this week, we are doing Summoner and Scholar, the jobs that upgrade from the Arcanist class. And so it's a very interesting and unique combo, those two, because I guess, from what I was reading on the wiki, those two classes share a level because they're both upgraded from Arcanist, despite one of them being a healer and one of them being a DPS. So that is actually very interesting that they share a level and share gear and, equipment, all that stuff, despite functioning very differently as classes. I think that's very interesting that they were designed in such a way. So obviously, I imagine there's a lot of comparing and contrasting between the two jobs, and mechanically, I haven't gotten there and wouldn't be doing that for quite some time because I've only played a little bit of Arcanist, but I am excited to compare and contrast the different storylines of the two jobs to see which one I prefer. Before we get to talk about the job storylines, though, there are a couple other things I want to get into. One is related to the channel, and one is related to 14 in general. As far as news with the channel, this week is the final Thin Lizzy Thursday. I've been doing those since 2020, so 6 years of Thin Lizzy Thursdays finally coming to an end. When the pandemic started and I was trapped at home like everybody else, I was just looking for something to do, and my job gave me a headset. And so I decided, I'll just do some reactions, because why not? I'm not doing anything else right now. But the problem was that me being a music connoisseur, basically everything that people wanted me to react to, I'd already listened to. So it was like, I heard this song before, let me react to it again. And so it wasn't really what people were looking for from a reaction channel. And Thin Lizzy being one of my favorite bands, I decided I would just do fun reaction to once a week as just like let's just do like a special once a week Thin Lizzy thing as a tribute to one of my favorite bands. And hit the songs randomly. I thought that'd just be a fun thing to do once a week, to go through the entire catalog, analyze it, and break down why each song is great. I eventually stopped doing reactions because I got copyright strikes and stuff, and I just didn't want the channel to be destroyed. But Thin Lizzy was a band I never had any issues with, so I kept Thin Lizzy Thursdays going, so it's this weird relic of me doing reactions back then. And it is nice that someone has cataloged, the entire discography, demos included. They're a great band, extremely underrated, and so I'm glad to be able to do that. But also, I am glad to be done with it. I feel that you want to stop doing things before you stop enjoying them. And I think there was some negativity in the Thin Lizzy Thursday comment section that just made it kind of a drag to do towards the end. A lot of positivity, a lot of people really loved it, who were excited about it, but some of the negativity did sour it a bit on me towards the end. And one of the reasons I'm really grateful for these 14 vlogs is how generally positive the comment section is. And it is also probably good for the channel that I stopped doing the Thin Lizzy Thursdays, because the algorithm really doesn't like it if someone watches one of your videos but doesn't watch another one of your videos. And so the two different audiences were kind of strangling each other. So it will be better for the vlogs going forward with Thin Lizzy Thursdays being done. So bittersweet, but also I feel satisfied, I feel ready to move on. And I do encourage everyone to check out some Thin Lizzy songs. On every Thin Lizzy Thursday, there is a ranking of the songs in the pinned comment. So just look at the ranking and see which ones does Greg like the best. I'll check out some of those. For a pitch on Thin Lizzy, for people who are not familiar with the band or maybe just know the boys are back in town, imagine Bruce Springsteen, but make him half black, half Irish, and with a heavier emphasis on heavy metal guitars. So like Iron Maiden twin guitar harmonies, but also with still all the balladry and saxophone and stuff you want from Springsteen. So imagine just heavy metal Irish Bruce Springsteen with a little bit more funk and soul, and also a lot more Celtic influence, a little bit of Elvis Presley, James Dean swagger, and a healthy dose of socialism, all wrapped in a classic rock band with an extremely tight rhythm section with some nice swing to the drums. That's going to be Thin Lizzy. And so, a great catalog, a lot of great songs. Highly recommend you check them out. But on to 14-related news. FanFest was last weekend. And I didn't watch all of it because I'm avoiding spoilers for the vlog. But I did see some highlights, and some of my friends in my Discord did share some highlights also. The Final Fantasy VII collab is really, really exciting. I figured that they were going to be doing a Final Fantasy VII collab with Revelation, and I figured they were waiting until Part 3 to do a collab for story reasons, because the 15 and 16 crossover events, it's like, oh no, I got sucked into like a portal in this part of the game's story, and now I'm in Eorzea. And I figured, okay, well, it's going to be Cloud in the live stream. He gets sucked in, and while he's sucked into the live stream, he ends up in Eorzea, and then he goes back. And that's what I figured it would be. And so they had to wait for that point in the remake trilogy story for that to happen. But I did not expect it to be a raid series. That was a very cool, unexpected surprise. So that's going to be dope. There was a line during FanFest that all Warriors of Light can enjoy this crossover. And so I wonder if it's going to be locked behind Evercold. And the reason I wonder that is because locking a Final Fantasy VII piece of content behind like every expansion in the game, given how much of a gateway Final Fantasy VII is for fans of the series into checking out other games, feels like an odd choice. I know that raids always are with whatever the new expansion is, but I wonder if they're going to make it so you could access it with just A Realm Reborn, and be the first raid post A Realm Reborn that doesn't require you to beat all the expansions. I wonder if they would make it so people who are new to the game could jump into it right away. I wouldn't think that if not for hearing that one line, and maybe I'm just reading into it, and they're more talking about difficulty levels. You know, it's a very big ask to ask people to play through every single expansion to get to the 7 raid series, if that is the reason you're interested in playing 14, is because you're a big 7 fan. But if you only have to play through A Realm Reborn, that might get a lot more people to try it. So I wonder if that line has more significance or if I'm just reading too much into it. But yeah, also I'm super excited about the Gold Saucer expansion and just sticking 7's Gold Saucer into the 14 Gold Saucer. I always thought the vibe of 7's Gold Saucer was a lot better, so I'm really excited for that. And I'm excited for the typing minigame. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I could see Summoner Jobin and myself grinding for hours to get those 7 rewards, to get the Guard Scorpion mount and getting the Tifa and Barret outfits. I think that's going to be fun. And also, it's such a dumb, silly minigame that it feels very much in the spirit of 7 and the spirit of 14. So that's just tremendous. I'm all about this. There's so much wonderful news from FanFest. The ability to have Chocobo NPCs in dungeons for parties of 2 is amazing. I think that's incredible because, you know, Summoner Job and I, we play as a party of 2 quite a bit, going through different 14 content because I play with my buddy Summoner Jobin once a week. And, you know, sometimes when we find people in the party finder, Summoner Jobin likes to wander and explore, and people in the party finder are usually less excited about him wandering and exploring. So this would be good to give us more breathing room, and not having to worry about, you know, getting someone to vote dismiss Summoner Jobin. I think Radel Girl said in the Discord, this could change the Greg and Jobin meta, and I think it is going to change the gameplay meta for us pretty significantly. That's a very exciting change. So yeah, all the stuff with FanFest has been extremely exciting for me as a big 7 fan. What they're doing with the crossover is extremely exciting. These are all really wonderful changes. I'm very excited for the changes to 14. Yeah, just really great stuff. But yeah, as far as actual 14 playing lately, you know, there's been my weekly playdates with Summoner Jobin, continuing our way through the Dragoon quest line, which I've done previously with Lighto, but now I'm doing it with my alt so that I can play along with Jobin, and we got a pretty hard stop at level 28, so we have to get up a couple levels to do the next quest. Bought the Taken Aback emote at the Gold Saucer because I had my characters parked there just to get the points for the fashion report, because most of the playing I do is just logging in once a week for the fashion report, although occasionally during work meetings I'll just do a duty as Lighto to just get some gil. But otherwise, it's still just watching the job quests on YouTube, baby, which I am actually watching with a controller, as silly as that might sound. I have a program called Joy to Key that maps keystrokes on your computer to button presses on your controller. And I have a controller set up for another Eden, and it also works really well for YouTube. And so whenever I need to pause a line of dialogue, I actually just hit the button on my controller. That's like I'm scrolling through the dialogue in 14, and if I need to rewind, I'll hit like the left button, or if I need to fast forward, I'll hit the right button. So I'm still actually using a controller as I'm going through the great Final Fantasy XIV filler arc, even for the YouTube stuff. And so it does, to a degree, make it feel like I am still playing 14, because I have that same controller in my hand, I'm hearing the same music, watching cutscenes, controlling the pace of the cutscenes. And even though I'm not talking about any 1.0 stuff today, I am actually really grateful for doing this filler arc with all the 1.0 content because it's given me a greater connection to 1.0. Because I'm mentioning so much 1.0 content with 2.0 and onwards, and I'm consuming it the same way as I am consuming a lot of this 2.0 content, I'm consuming a lot of it together and treating the 1.0 job and class quests as part of the same storyline. It's given me a greater connection to 1.0 where I don't feel as big of a disconnect, as I'm sure a lot of fans do, where like 1.0 is this weird, nebulous thing that doesn't even feel like a part of 14 in a lot of ways. But because I've, at this point, watched the 1.0 cutscenes for the main story multiple times, watched the Hildebrand 1.0 cutscenes, and now have been watching all of the job cutscenes on YouTube for 1.0, I feel a much greater connection and appreciation for 1.0, where, mechanically, it's probably an inferior, buggy version of 11, essentially, without the nice quality of life features from modern 11, which is some of the stuff I like best about 11. So I'm sure gameplay-wise I would have a lot of gripes with it, but I am so glad that part of this journey has been consuming the 1.0 stuff because it's making me feel a greater connection to 1.0 and then making 14 a grander, richer experience overall. So I'm really grateful for this filler arc for that reason. But yeah, so this week I did the Summoner questline and the Scholar questline, and so let's dive right in. So the Summoner questline begins with Thurbergeim informing us that the Sons of St. Cornac, the Charlian organization that did the Crystal Tower questline with us, are seeking an Arcanist who has a history of fighting primals. And so we meet with Ymitra, Ystola's sister, and she explains that the organization has been researching ancient Allagan mages called Summoners who could obtain the energy of primals and turn them into allies called Igi. They want to use the power of Summoners to bring an end to the age of conflict with the Empire. And so in order to summon an Igi, one must defeat a Primal and capture its etheric essence, and we manage to get Ifrit's essence and the ability to summon a Flame Igi. While attaining the Titan Igi, we get attacked by another summoner who claims we have a treasure that he seeks. And though we're able to fight him off, Ymitra admits to being surprised to meet another practitioner of the summoner arts, and that he would attack us. And Ymitra wonders what kind of treasure they seek that they think that we have. Ymitra does some research, and she thinks that she has uncovered the identity of our attacker, a man named Tristan, a former soldier of the Immortal Flames, though she doesn't know how he came to become a summoner. In order to prepare for an eventual confrontation with Tristan, we make our way to Rambros to get some better summoner gear, and after obtaining it, Ymitra instructs us to go to the floating city of Nim in Outer La Nosea to get Garuda's Igi. And it's here that I noticed the summoner gear has the summoner horn on the headpiece, and I thought that was a really nice reference to Final Fantasy 9, 3, and 5. Really, really cool to see the summoner horn. And we get Garuda's Igi, and man, the Igi are not that cool looking. I think the summons, at least in terms of appearance, are kind of a letdown in comparison to some of the games around it. 13 summons had really awesome dynamic designs, and 15 and 16 just had like these insanely epic summons. And I get why they went with the Igi route because of how massive the primals are, and it would not make canonical sense for you to be able to summon them when also fighting a primal. That would be very bizarre. So I do get why mechanically they went the Igi route, but I just don't think they're cool looking. I think they're just kind of lackluster, womp womp. After some time passes, Ymitra tells us her colleagues in the Sons of St. Cornac were murdered off screen, and this questline is a lot of tell and not show, and most of the dialogue is driven in a really weak way without too many cutscenes, and it's kind of wild how much stronger the Arcanist storyline was in terms of presentation and overall writing. Like this just being hand-waved in a line of dialogue like, oh yeah, this bad thing happened off screen, and it's not really giving anyone an emotional journey in any way. It's very lackluster. And so we go and confront Tristan, who gives several summoner job crystals to an Ascian, and then that Ascian gives Tristan a power-up via said crystals. It's revealed that Tristan made an alliance with the Ascians to gain power so that he could rid the world of all the beast tribes and primals once and for all. We fight him, and afterwards, it is revealed that his brother became one of Ifrit's thralls, and Tristan killed his brother afterwards, which he claims he did to save his brother from the stain of embarrassment, but I read it more as a mercy killing, and then he wanted to get revenge on all of the beast tribes and primals, and he calls it an insult, and just like, oh, they insulted our honor, but I don't buy it. I think it was just depression about his brother being turned into a, mindless zombie, essentially, and just the rage that brought about. So I view it as not as much about honor and pride and more about the hurt and sorrow for his brother's tragic fate. And so Tristan tries to defeat us with one final attack, but he gets consumed by the power of his summon and is engulfed in flames. Sometime later, Dancing Wolf of the Immortal Flames comes to question us about what happened to Tristan and explains someone matching his description had just attacked a merchant caravan. We thought that Tristan died when he was consumed by the flames, and so we offered to help investigate. Dancing Wolf explains to us that he was actually the former commander of Tristan and his brother Kahedin when they were in the Immortal Flames, and through our investigations we found out that Tristan has been collecting large quantities of crystals, so we suspect he plans on summoning a primal. We bait out Tristan with a trap and end up fighting a robed summoner, but when we examine the summoner after the fight, Dancing Wolf explains the summoner is Tristan's brother Kahedin. The Ascian from earlier appears and explains his disappointment in the weakness of the brothers, as he hoped to groom them as pawns to help revive Zodiark. After we meet with Ymitra to discuss our inability to summon Igi of more powerful primals, she explains she learned of an ancient summoner art known as trance that allowed summoners to infuse themselves with the essence of a primal's power in order to summon them. And so trance, cool, Final Fantasy IX reference, nice. And so we go to the Cartano Flats to try to obtain Bahamut's power, but we end up fighting the Ascian, and during the fight we obtain both Bahamut's power and trance, and force the Ascian to flee. After the battle, Ymitra posits that perhaps our Ascian is of a lower class, and doesn't have the ability to inhabit the bodies of the living, but only the bodies of the dead. Ymitra then explains that she uncovered in her research a technique we can use to defeat the Ascian, but in order to learn the technique, we need to obtain a book from the Great Gubal Library. While there, we are confronted by the Ascian and a group of his allies. We defeat all of them, including the lead Ascian, with our special new tech. And Dancing Wolf is confused because he thought we needed the tome from the library to learn the technique, but Ymitra explains that she deceived Dancing Wolf in order to deceive our enemies, and that we just needed the catalyst of battle to focus our energies. She knew that traveling to the library would make the Ascians assume we were seeking an ancient technique, when really it was just bait to lure them out. Dancing Wolf is grateful to put the horrors of his Ifrit mission behind him, and will lay a grave for Tristan beside his brother, where people can pay respects to him even if his body isn't there. And so I know this questline was trying to give the emotional arc and journey to Dancing Wolf, but he didn't get as much screen time and was a bit more of a stiff presence on screen, where the journey of him overcoming his trauma of failing his subordinates wasn't really well conveyed, and a lot of this questline was, again, tell, not show. So I think there is a potential for a good story there, but it didn't quite land as hard as I would have liked. Sometime later, we're given an ancient Allegan tome by Rambros to give to Ymitra, and when reading the book, it begins talking, and it is revealed to be a mimic named Principia. Principia was created to pass down the ancient knowledge of summoners to those deemed worthy, and to prove ourselves, we need to undertake some trials, because of course we do, it's a video game. The first two trials are relatively uneventful, fighting against a monster, and then training against some summoners under Dancing Wolf's command, and those summoners basically become allies for the rest of this questline. And the third trial is supposed to be a mock battle on Seal Rock against a realistic primal threat alongside other summoners. But the other summoners involved in the training exercise are attacked by mysterious Igi, and so we go to help them. We end up fighting against a summoner who can summon creatures that aren't Igi, and after the battle, the summoner is revealed to be Sari, the summoner from ancient Allag, who made Principia and left his wisdom in the tome. Sari casts a spell on Principia and then vanishes. Principia thinks that the summoner that we encountered was not actually Sari, but perhaps a clone, and explains that the wisdom in his tomes have been sealed behind an arcane lock that only Sari has the key to. We reach out to Rowena and ask to borrow some of her tomestones to see if we can find out more information about Sari. We learn that Sari used machines to enhance traditional summoning methods at a time when anti-summoner sentiment was spreading across Allag. He was found dead by the military, who then decided to use his research for their own purposes, but after a cataclysmic accident, they decided to no longer utilize his findings. We suspect that the military was using a clone of Sari for their experiments, and that we awakened the clone when we arrived on Seal Rock. And it looks like Sari's clone is headed to the Etherico-Chemical Research Facility, where the results of the original Sari's work was bundled off to. Principia reveals that the seal is designed to vanish after the one who made the seal is deceased, and we wonder if it's Sari's clone goading us into defeating him, or just leading us into a trap. We encounter Sari in Az's Law, and he vanishes, and we suspect he's not a clone but is rather a summon, summoned by machines, and we need to defeat Sari's summoner, though we don't know who his summoner is. When we go to confront Sari, they explain they were programmed to turn strong entities into Igi, meaning they plan on turning the Warrior of Light into one. And we find the summoner of Sari is a mechanical orb, a summoning node, and it summons additional Saris and we have to fight them. After defeating them, we get some additional lore about Sari's descent into bitter pessimism, his eventual... And we find the soul crystals of his students, which Principia decides to store within themselves for safekeeping before going into a deep slumber. And once again, it's another very lore-heavy quest in the Summoner questline with, honestly, not that much emotional impact. This is pretty much all lore. And I don't think the lore in this questline adds too much to the game, if I'm being honest. Before this part of the Summoner questline, we knew that Summoners were a part of ancient Allag society, and then we just got like a little bit more details about, hey, at a certain point in Allegan history, summoners were less liked, and at a certain point in Allegan history, they used tech to help with their summons. That's basically it. And I don't know if building an entire questline around that little bit of lore that doesn't add too much to the lore, in my opinion, was worth it. Like, you could have gotten all that additional lore in like one quest, and then you make an entire questline with, as the point of it, without a core emotional journey. I wasn't into this part of the Summoner questline that much. I mean, it is kind of cool that you have some Final Fantasy X and X-2 comparisons of just like, Machina and machines and how they intertwine with the summoners, and the summoners eventually being disliked by society. Like, that's kind of cool, I guess, but I don't know. I just wasn't feeling it, especially after how good Arcanist was. It was kind of a letdown. Super heavy on exposition and so light on characterization. And the thing is, like, I don't in general like a lot of fantasy novels because a lot of them are so lore heavy and focus on lore and exposition and have really flat, uninteresting, one-dimensional characters. And so, like, in general, I don't enjoy reading fantasy books because I find a lot of them to be trash. Not to say there isn't great fantasy, but, I'm more of a character-focused guy. The Rocky movies are, at least the first one, you can argue they kind of get into fantasy later, but they're grounded narratives based around strong characterization. And I'm more into that than just, ooh, this ancient civilization from thousands of years ago, did you know they sometimes use machines? Like, okay, but like, what does that mean for the journey that we're going on? Nothing? Okay, cool. Good lore mixed with good storytelling is great, like with Chrono Trigger, because of the thematic depth of what Zeo represents and how it affects the characters and how it's the focal point of the entire narrative. This is just, hey, we gave you some extra details about like the tech that they used. Isn't that cool? The epilogue quest for the Summoner questline has us going to meet with Jaja Samu, one of the summoners from the Immortal Flames, who helped assist us in the Sari arc, who I guess was also in the Company of Heroes, and is on leave in Gridania and wants to meet up with us. Jaja Samu speaks to us of his experience fighting alongside two young folk blessed with a resistance to primal influence, Arenvald and Fordola, and he seems bothered by the fact that their presence on the front line is less of a choice than an imposed duty, especially given that Fordola is basically a prisoner forced to fight. And he wants to know their thoughts on the matter and asks us to talk to them. We go to Ralgar's Reach to talk to Arenvald, and I see Jamoldva there, which is really cool. I'm like, oh, I know you. And Arenvald suggests we talk to Fordola together. And we find Fordola working out in her cell like she's in Triple R. And both Arenvald and Fordola talk about their motivations for fighting, Arenvald fighting for others and Fordola fighting for survival. And I also learned that Arenvald probably has a crush on Fordola. I wonder how the shippers feel about this one. We go back and tell Jaja Samu what we learned. It helps give him peace being a support unit, knowing the mentality of those he is supporting. And that closed out the Summoner questline, and I just wasn't really into these. The character with the most personality was the talking book, and though Jaja Samu actually got some pretty decent writing at the end, showcasing a thoughtful, reflective side, and frustration with the limitations of his power, because, that is a thing that I have thought about, those who are out there fighting primals but have to maintain their distance so they don't get turned. That was good, and it does show him being frustrated with the limitations of his power, while also accepting a level of humility about the things he can't change. That was actually pretty good. But otherwise, these quests were pretty much all about lore, and very little emotional impact. And the thing is, the lore that they were talking about was not that interesting. If you're going to be super lore heavy, that lore better be dope, and this lore was just so okay. And the Summoner questline looks really bad in comparison to the Arcanist questline, in my opinion, which had a lot less impact on lore, but a much better emotional journey and characterization. And I have a note here saying, I hope the Scholar questline is better, and spoilers, it is. The Scholar questline begins with us talking to Murray from the Arcanist Guild, saying that a marauder named Alka is seeking assistance with archaeological research, which is weird because marauders usually aren't the scholarly intellectual type. And so I have a note here saying this weird piece of writing is probably a justification as to why you had to level up Marauder to unlock Scholar. At least that was my assumption, that you had to unlock Marauder, and that it was a relic of the days of leveling multiple classes to unlock a job. Alka is researching the ancient civilization of Nim to study their military tactics, but needs assistance from an Arcanist to analyze ancient texts that relate to magic and their mechanics. However, the Nimian tablets they mean to analyze were stolen en route to Limsa, so we need to go get them back before we can begin our studying of the ancient texts. And that was a really good excuse to get into an action sequence right away at the beginning of the questline. I actually thought that was pretty clever. I like that. When we get the tablet, we also find a crystal, and when we hold the crystal in our hand, a fairy appears. We find out that this crystal is the soul of the scholar, and will allow us to summon a fairy familiar. And then the next quest is called The Last Remnants, named after the Square game The Last Remnant. And in the quest, we go and explore the lost city of Nim to try to remind the fairy of the past so it can remember spells it had long forgotten so that you can use them in combat. And I had actually seen a little bit of the Lost City of Nim in the Summoner questline, and actually stopped what I was doing of watching these job quests on YouTube, logged in as Lito, and decided to just explore the area. Since when playing Final Fantasy XIV, I spent like next to no time there, forgot it even existed, and thought it looked really cool. But anyway, back to the filler. A Tonberry was spotted in Bronze Lake, and the Marauders Guild was asked to dispatch it. And because Tonberries dwell in the Wanderer's Palace, an ancient Nim temple, we might learn more about the people of Nim if we investigate. We get attacked by a Tonberry dressed as a scholar, and we're about to finish it off, but our fairy jumps in front to protect it, and prevents us from landing the killing blow. Alka has done more research and found out that apparently scholars would use their talents to help heal the sick, and were instrumental in combating a plague that once threatened to engulf all of Nim. And so because of this, Alka believes that tending to patients in Camp Bronze Lake might rekindle additional memories for the fairy, and thus give us more spells to use. And so we go and heal people in Camp Bronze Lake, and then after that we go on a mission into the Wanderer's Palace to fight Tonberries, and once again fight the Scholar Tonberry, but the fairy protects it. And rather than kill the Tonberry, we end up healing it, and the Tonberry speaks and explains his name is Sarito Kurito, and explains that there was a plague that turned the Nims into Tonberries. And immediately my mind jumps to Windurst and Final Fantasy XI, and the rhyming first name and last name, and realizing like, oh, this dude is probably a Tarutaru or Lalafell since it's 14, and Nim is maybe like a Windurst equivalent, but also in Final Fantasy XI, the Kalu were transformed into Tonberries in Final Fantasy XI, so that's another parallel to Final Fantasy XI. So immediately my mind went, Final Fantasy XI parallel, this is cool, I like this. The Tonberries became despised and hated and infected with the Rancor, but the Warrior of Light's kindness freed Sarito from the Rancor. And I really like that. I like the Warrior of Light showing mercy and that kindness actually being what solves the problem instead of just fighting. Like, that's just awesome. I eat that up. And also, I have a note here saying, I guess the fairy is named Lily. But yeah, after some time, we meet with Sarito Kurito, who has managed to save some, but not all, of his comrades from the Rancor. However, the disease that turned the Nim into Tonberries, the Green Death, has returned, and Sarito Kurito has had to forcibly quarantine many Tonberries, so that the disease doesn't spread even further. In order to safely seal the Tonberries away, we need to gather keystones. And after gathering some keystones and sealing away the Tonberries, Sarito Kurito expresses frustration with being unable to find a cure for their ailment. We talk about the origins of the Green Death when Nim traders ended up on an island full of Lalafells after a terrible storm, and the natives took care of the travelers and sent them back to Nim with a gift, a vase. And we wonder if the vase might be the cause of the Green Death. And so we find the vase, but get attacked by Void Scent. And when we tell Sarito Kurito this and give him the vase, he is shocked by what he sees inside, a binding sigil carved into the bottom to hold a Void Scent. Sarito reveals that this was the work of Mach, an ancient nation of Magi who drew their might from the void and coveted Nim. Sarito wonders if everything, including the storm itself, was all part of a Mach plot to bring low the people of Nim. And so this was really cool because the Lost City of Mach was a storyline that didn't do as much for me at the time, but has grown on me as I've reflected upon the lore implications. And so I knew that Mach and Ampedor had their war and rivalry, but giving the extra context for Nim and why the Tonberries are there is a lot of really interesting world building and lore that does change the context of things quite a bit. And I am finding it much more interesting than the Summoner lore, but we're also getting strong emotional connections to specific characters because you're seeing Sarito, someone who is affected by these things, trying to find a cure for his people and still dealing with the effects to this day. So we're getting interesting lore, but also a greater connection to characters. So at this point, I'm enjoying the Scholar questline quite a bit, and it's helping build the momentum that the Summoner questline lost for me. It is lore heavy, but I think the lore is more interesting, more complex, adding more to the world, and also we're getting better characterization at the same time. Sarito Kurito believes the vanishing void scent that was sealed inside the vase is what caused the disease, and we decide to track it down in order to defeat it and hopefully find a cure. Sarito brings in a companion of his, Helga Toga, a legendary rural marine from Nim, now also a Tonberry, to train us while he investigates the location of the void scents. And the training with Helga Toga is really amusing and pretty funny, and Alka and his men, fellow marauders who are just, excited to be trained by a legend of the past, are super into it. However, Cerrito has hit a dead end in his research, and Alka suggests we reach out to his friends in the Thaumaturges Guild to see if they know anything. We find out that a member of the guild was researching Vanishing Void Scent, but he went missing years ago. We find the mage's belongings in a shipwrecked vessel in Kurthus, and bring them back to Cerrito, who is able to find a way to track down the invisible Void Scent by following its etheric trail. We find the Void Scent, and with Lily's power, make it appear before us, and we defeat it, finally stopping the spread of the Green Death once and for all. Helga is proud of the legacy of his marines being carried by Alka and his men, and Cerrito examines the corpse of the Void Scent to find a cure and find a way to halt the sickness from spreading even further. However, Satoto, one of Cerrito's comrades assisting in his experiments, has vanished, and Cerrito asks us to help find Satoto. We decide to check to see if any Tonberries have been registered as hunt targets, and the only one listed is Marberry, who I had actually fought previously, though we do hear rumors of a stowaway who matches Satoto's description. We eventually track down Satoto, who actually looks a lot like Marberry, basically like a black mage Tonberry, surrounded by poachers, and we rescue her from them. Alka can tell she's a woman right away and thinks she's beautiful and seems to have a crush on her, and I have a note saying, this is really cute. The fact that he is able to see past the Tonberry transformation and just see the beautiful girl trapped inside of the curse. Immediately, I am so endeared to this. Alka has been a pretty charming character throughout, where he's just enthusiastic to learn more about the past. His reasoning being, I just want to learn their military tactics, but he does have that genuine enthusiasm for learning. And so adding this really endearing, seeing the beauty within thing to his character is just the charm. The charm is nice, and how Satoto seems to appreciate it. It's just it's dope. I love it. Satoto explains her father, a scholar and royal marine, was sent on a mission to infiltrate Ampidor to find a cure for the Green Death, and even though it's been more than 1,000 years since then, and he's long since passed, so Tonberries have longer lifespans, she still wants to see if she can find a memento and keepsake of him. And this deeply touches Alka, and he vows to help. And again, this is great because it's tying in lore with actual emotions and character journeys. This is great. We go to Ampidor Keep to see if we can find any of Satoto's father's belongings, and I noticed that a lot of job quests seem to often have a solo duty, where you go through a dungeon that is normally a party duty. That's just a thing I put in the notes here that I think is pretty interesting, but pretty cool. And we find a chest with her father's tome, robes, and soul crystal in it. Satoto tries to call her father's familiar, Lilac, but she passes out after a ball of energy flies from the soul crystal. We take her to Camp Tranquil to recover, and Londino helps in looking after Satoto while the Warrior of Light goes to report to Cerrito. Cerrito thinks that Satoto passed out due to only succeeding in a partial summoning of Lilac, and that in order to wake up Satoto, we need to find the partially manifested fairy. And so we find out that the fairy is in the lost city of Ampidor, and we go in with Alka and Londinel, who has developed a brotherly bond of affection towards Satoto as he's looked after her. And it's another duty of an optional dungeon, and I think it's cool how many of these are in the Scholar Quest line. I think that's really awesome. The fairy possesses the statue from the Shadowbringers trailer, and we fight it and beat it, and after the fight, Lily leads us to a red gemstone that we take with us. And then there's a really touching scene with Satoto after she wakes up, and both Alka and Londino are really nice to her. I like this a lot. And we take the gemstone to Cerrito, and he explains it is the core of the Guardian statue, concentrated white magic, and that concentrated white magic could be used to cure diseases, and it's what Satoto's father likely went to Ampidor for. And so we realize that Lilac, though not fully summoned, used the last of its will to guide us to Ampidor to get this gem. And once again, it's very endearing because Satoto wanted to summon Lilac because Lilac felt like the last member of her family that she'd be able to see, because Lilac was basically a family member to Satoto because it was her father's familiar, so it was the closest connection she had to family. And that last family member was still trying to help her thousands of years later, that love extending through time and trying to help, it's warm fuzzies. Love it, love it, love it. And the cute flirting between Satoto and Alka is also great. This is so endearing. And afterwards, we gather some items for what we think will be a cure for the Tonberry curse. And apparently, to get one of the items, Alka had to massage Godbert with salamander oil to get him to craft stuff for us. Lol. However, the process of curing the Tonberry curse is experimental and might do more harm than good and might mutate the Tonberries further. Satoto volunteers and argues that if the experiment fails, Cerrito is the only one who can continue the research, and so he can't be the one to be the test subject. But Satoto's decision causes a rift between Satoto and Alka because he doesn't want to risk her mutating. Sarito explains that he thinks that Toto is doing this because she loves Alka, but wants to return to her non-Tonberry form in order to confess her feelings. But if Alka found out that that was the reason she volunteered, and then mutated further, and that he'd have to kill her, that would break his heart even further. And so we go and talk to Satoto, and she confesses that she does love Alka, but she's also the youngest victim of the plague, and the last one to be affected, so she's the one that the curse has affected the least, and thus she is the least likely to feel side effects of the treatment, and she's always wanted the opportunity to help others, so she really feels like she is the best person appropriate for this experiment, and also it is an opportunity for her to do good. And so we go through the experimental process, which involves Satoto drinking a potion to destabilize her ether, and then Alka using the Amplitoid gemstone we received to amplify the restorative scholar magic that we and Lily cast on Satoto, while she uses her willpower to avoid mutating. And it ends up working, and she's back to being a Lalafell, and the Lalafell love is so cute. Oh my goodness, my heart. And then in the video I was watching, some dude showed up in the Final Fantasy 15 car in the video, which, kind of took away from the scene afterwards when just like a random flying car shows up. But, you gotta love MMOs and that bullshit. Sarito wants to monitor Satoto's condition for a little while, but he's hopeful that they'll be able to cure all of the Tonberries. And this questline was great. The Scholar questline works way better than the Summoner questline because the lore tells us something that really changes our perspective, gives us a lot of additional information about multiple parties. It adds a lot to the lore, while Summoner was lore heavy and didn't really add that much to the lore. Like the Allagans using their tech for summons sometimes doesn't really change our perspective on their society, and didn't tell us that much different other than the fact that, like, hey, they had summoners. Cool. And, in this questline, we learn about Nim and Mach, and given more context to that raid series, more information about Ampador. We get the lore about why the Tonberries are hanging out in the Wanderer's Palace. It fills out a lot more of the world and a lot of different societies, not just one, and a lot of details about the different societies. Beyond that, it was also more of an emotional journey, and there were a lot more personality for the characters. Alka, Sarito, Satoto, those are all really strong characters. Yamitra, I like her character design, and she's likable, but how would you describe her personality? Chill, I guess? The Scholar questline had a lot of fun comparisons to Final Fantasy XI, and I guess, the Summoner questline had some comparisons to 10 and 10 too, and I guess a little bit to 4, but I wasn't as into the Summoner questline, but I really liked the Scholar questline. I wonder what the consensus on these two are, because I have a very strong preference one way, and I wonder if some people prefer the Summoner questline, so definitely let me know which of these two questlines you prefer, Summoner or Scholar. In terms of story, mechanically, I acknowledge that maybe Summoner is more fun to play as. I mean, you've got a DPS versus a healer, so obviously they play very differently, but in terms of pure narrative, Scholar just crushed it, easily, for me at least. So next up is the only other job class I played as in 14, Thaumaturge. So it's the last job I have any experience playing as in 14. And then beyond that, all of these filler episodes are going to be jobs I haven't touched at all. But I'm excited to dive into Thaumaturge because we do have some 1.0 quests, so I'm interested to see what those are, what the Thaumaturge questline is, and how it transforms into Black Mage. I'm excited to see all of that. I feel like this should be one of the better ones, theoretically, but, Paladin, one of my favorite jobs, was a big letdown narrative-wise, so we'll see. But, yeah, Scholar, this was great. Loved it. Summoner, it had some good parts, but didn't do as much for me. But, yeah, excited to continue our journey through the great Final Fantasy XIV filler arc. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to do the liking. The liking helps so much. And please be sure to leave a comment. They help these videos get boosted in the algorithm. So please leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.